Why is Israel bombing in Syria? Over the course of the last weekend, the Israeli Air Force carried out extensive bombing operations in Syria, including an attack right near the presidential palace that the Israelis said explicitly was a warning to the new leader of Syria, the jihadist Al-Julani, warning him not to endanger the Druze community. So let's understand what's happening here. The Druze community that lives in the southeastern part of Syria has come under attack by jihadist Sunni militias that are aligned with, that are loyal to the regime, but don't officially work for the regime. And they started attacking the Druze, massacring them and humiliating them by shaving their heads. They assassinated the mayor of a Druze community. And they're doing this, they say, because an audio was leaked on social media in Syria that ostensibly had a member of the Druze community insulting Muhammad. And this led to these jihadist Islamist militias coming to the area where the Druze live and massacring people. Israel, in response, started bombing in Syria. The UN Secretary General condemned them. Many world leaders condemned the Israelis. The UN Special Envoy for Syria, Geir Pedersen, denounced the strikes on his X account, and he said, quote, "I strongly condemn Israel's continued and escalating violations of Syria's sovereignty, including multiple airstrikes in Damascus and other cities." He called for an immediate cease of the attacks and for Israel to, quote, "stop endangering Syrian civilians and to respect international law and Syria's sovereignty, unity, territorial integrity, and independence." And for good measure, the president of Turkey, the dictator Erdogan, called the Israeli attacks, quote, "an unacceptable provocation." So with everything going on in Israel, with everything Israel's dealing with Hamas in the Gaza Strip and in Judea and Samaria and Hezbollah in Lebanon and the Houthis in Yemen and Iran, why is Israel getting involved in what seems to be a domestic dispute in Syria? Why is Israel doing this? Have a look at this clip.
הבטחת תקיים, תוציא חיל אוויר, תכניס אותנו, אנחנו מילואימניקים, מתנדבים, חיילים, יש לנו את הכל. תן לנו להיכנס, אנחנו נגן עליהם. אנחנו נדע איך לעשות את זה, אבל להפקיר את העדה שלנו, שאתה הבטחת לשמור עליה, להגן עליה, גם זה לא ניתן לך הפעם.
Make sure to go into the description of this video below and download the free ebook that is available there. This is a collection of columns that I've published over the course of the last year and a half since the beginning of the October 7th war. It gives you a feel for everything we've been through in this war. So go ahead and download that ebook. So what you saw in that clip is a prominent Druze journalist who is calling on Prime Minister Netanyahu, calling on the Israeli government, on the IDF, to do more to protect the Druze community in Syria. And he went even further and called on the Israelis to allow Israeli Druze who are trained combat soldiers in the IDF, who are IDF reservists, to allow them to go into Syria to protect the Druze community there. And this is a pretty powerful statement. The Druze community in Israel serves in the IDF. They're loyal Israeli citizens, and a lot of them are elite combat soldiers. But it's not only this journalist. There were also widespread demonstrations in the northern part of Israel. The Druze community was demonstrating over the course of the weekend, calling on the Israeli government to do more to intervene on behalf of the Druze community. And Muwaffaq Tarif, who is the leader of the Druze community in Israel, he's the most prominent leader of the Druze community, called on Israel and the Jews around the world and the international community to act now immediately to prevent a massacre. Quote, "Israel must not stand by in the face of events unfolding as we speak. Israeli leaders, you must take on the burden of action." That's Muwaffaq Tarif, the leader of the Druze community in Israel. So here you have the Druze community calling on the Israelis to intervene on behalf of the Druze in southeast Syria. But it's not only the Druze in Israel who are calling on the Israelis to protect the Druze in Syria. Have a look at this clip.
نتنياهو لم تلتزم بوعودك، نحن في محنة. إذا أردتم الوقوف معنا سيكون بشارة خير للمستقبل. وممكن التعامل معكم بسلام في المستقبل. وإذا لم يتم ذلك ستكون الأمور سيئة جدا على عموم سوريا وعلى علاقة الشراكة المستقبلية التي تطمحون لها ونحن نطمح لها.
That was a Druze resident of Suwaida, which is the area under attack in southeast Syria. His voice was muffled there for his own protection. And here he is also calling on Prime Minister Netanyahu, calling on the Israelis to intervene and protect the Druze community. Now, I should add that Israel did not only respond by carrying out airstrikes against Syrian military positions and warning the Syrian leader Al-Julani to lay off of the Druze and to protect the Druze. The Israelis also arranged for large quantities of humanitarian aid to be flown in. The Israeli Air Force flew humanitarian aid into the Druze community. I have to emphasize here, the Druze in Syria and the Druze in Israel are the same community. They're the same family. They're the same clans. This is a small ethnic group. There's only about 1 million Druze in the world. Most of them live in Syria. There's some in Lebanon and some in Israel. But along the Syria-Israel border, that's one community. Now, the Druze are not Muslim, and this is not the first time that these ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Sunni jihadists have attacked them. Back in 2018, in the same area, in the Suwaida province, the Suwaida area of Syria, this same community was attacked by ISIS, and there was a brutal massacre back then. And let's remember that Al-Julani, the current dictator of Syria, the current leader of Syria, whatever you want to call him, is a graduate, as it were. He's an alumnus of Al-Qaeda and ISIS. This is where he comes from. So the reason that Israel is carrying out these actions in Syria is not to endanger Syrian civilians, as the UN Special Envoy Geir Pedersen said. It's not a provocation, as Erdogan said. It is in order to protect the Druze community from the attack by jihadist Muslims. And as for the claim that Israel is compromising the territorial integrity and the sovereignty of Syria, let's pull back the camera and remind ourselves of something that I've pointed out in a number of other videos. Syria does not recognize any border with Israel. Syria, from the day that the State of Israel was founded, denied the existence of Israel and does not recognize any border with Israel. According to the Syrians, all of Israel is part of Syria. And therefore, there's no reason for Israel to respect any so-called border between Israel and Syria. But more importantly, the borders between Syria, Jordan, Iraq, Lebanon, all of these countries were all fictional borders that were made up by Western diplomats, mostly French and British diplomats, after World War I, after the Ottoman Empire fell, because the Turks got involved in World War I and they lost. So the Ottoman Empire was conquered by the Western nations. And these British and French diplomats met at a conference in the 1920s, and they put a map on the table. They took out a ruler and a pen, and they drew lines, and they created brand new countries. Syria, Iraq, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, all these countries were created in the 20th century. Never before the 20th century was anyone called a Syrian or a Jordanian or an Iraqi. And there were ethnic groups and nations that were living in these areas that did not have borders and did not have states and governments. They were just these large areas that were governed by the Ottoman Empire. There weren't actual countries. So when these lines got drawn on a map and part of the Druze community, their own ethnic group, part of the Druze community was in Syria and part of the Druze community was in Israel, that divided up an ethnic group. It divided up a family. And right now, with them coming under attack by these jihadist Muslims, who, I should point out, only about a month ago were attacking the Alawite minority in the northwestern part of Syria before they turned their attention to the Druze minority in the southeast, the Druze understand that they are in danger so long as they're living under this jihadist regime, and they are calling on Israel to come to their aid, to protect them, and to unite them with their families in Israel. That's what's really happening here. We're going to be watching this very closely.